With a snarl, Psepha unfolded his great wings and launched himself from his tree. A moment later the wizard was standing over him, shouting, "Tell it that if it singes me, I'll let the sword go. I'll let it go, so tell it." The tip of the black sword was hovering over Khoi-Sadra's throat. What was odd was that the wizard was obviously struggling with it, and it appeared to be singing to itself. "Psepha!" Khoi-Sadra shouted. The dragon roared in defiance, but pulled out of the dive that would have removed Rincewind's head, and flapped ponderously back to the tree. "Talk!" screamed Rincewind. Khoi-Sadra squinted at him up the length of the sword. "What would you like me to say?" he asked. "What?" "I said, what would you like me to say?" "Where are my friends? The barbarian and the little man is what I mean." "I expect they have been taken back to the Wyrmberg." Rincewind tugged desperately against the surge of the sword, trying to shut his mind to Kring's bloodthirsty humming. "What's a Wyrmberg?" he said. "The Wyrmberg. There is only one. It is Dragonholm." "And I suppose you were waiting to take me there, eh?" Khoi-Sadra yelped involuntarily as the tip of the sword pricked a bead of blood from his Adam's apple. "Don't want people to know you've got dragons here, eh?" snarled Rincewind. The dragon rider forgot himself enough to nod, and came within a quarter-inch of cutting his own throat. Rincewind looked around desperately, and realized that this was something he really was going to have to go through with. "Right then," he said, as diffidently as he could manage. "You'd better take me to this Wyrmberg of yours, hadn't you?" "I was supposed to take you in dead," muttered Khoi-Sadra sullenly. Rincewind looked down at him and grinned slowly. It was a wide, manic, and utterly humourless rictus. It was the sort of grin that is normally accompanied by small riverside birds wandering in and out, picking up scraps out of the teeth. "Alive will do," said Rincewind. "If we're talking about anyone being dead, remember whose sword is in which hand." "If you kill me, nothing will prevent Psepha killing you," shouted the prone dragon rider. "So what I'll do is I'll chop bits off," agreed the wizard. He tried the effect of the grin again. "Oh, all right," said Khoi-Sadra sulkily. "Do you think I've got no imagination?" He wriggled out from under the sword and waved at the dragon, which took wing again and glided in towards them. Rincewind swallowed. "You mean we've got to go on that?" he said. Khoi-Sadra looked at him scornfully, the point of Kring still aimed at his neck. "How else would anyone get to the Wyrmberg?" "I don't know," said Rincewind. "How else?" "I mean, there is no other way. It's flying or nothing." Rincewind looked again at the dragon before him. He could quite clearly see through it to the crushed grass on which it lay, but when he gingerly touched a scale that was a mere golden sheen on thin air, it felt solid enough. Either dragons should exist completely, or fail to exist at all, he felt. A dragon only half existing was worse than the extremes. "I didn't know dragons could be seen through," he said. Khoi-Sadra shrugged. "Didn't you?" he said. He swung himself astride the dragon awkwardly, because Rincewind was hanging onto his belt. Once uncomfortably aboard, the wizard moved his white-knuckle grip to a convenient piece of harness, and prodded Khoi-Sadra lightly with the sword. "Have you ever flown before?" said the dragon rider without looking round. "Not as such, no." "Would you like something to suck?" Rincewind gazed at the back of the man's head, then dropped to the bag of red and yellow sweets that was being proffered. "Is it necessary?" he asked. "It is traditional," said Khoi-Sadra. "Please yourself." The dragon stood up, lumbered heavily across the meadow, and fluttered into the air. Rincewind occasionally had nightmares about teetering on some intangible but enormously high place, and seeing a blue-distanced, cloud-punctuated landscape reeling away below him. This usually woke him up with his ankles sweating. He would have been even more worried had he known that the nightmare was not, as he thought, just the usual Discworld vertigo. It was a backwards memory of an event in his future so terrifying that it had generated harmonics of fear all the way along his lifeline. This was not that event, but it was good practice for it. Psepha clawed its way into the air with a series of vertebra-shattering bounds. At the top of its last leap, the wide wings unfolded with a snap and spread out with a thump which shook the trees. Then the ground was gone.